Hey everyone, it's Caitlin from Really Big Plant. Thank you so much for joining me for this video.
Really big plant.
So for this video, we're going to be doing a little plant care, another episode of plant chores. So I've got some repottings I want to do. I want to repot my Aurea monstera, my yellow variegated monstera. This is my my like stock plant, I guess. It's the oldest one that I have in my collection, and it's recently kind of slowed down its growth and it's gotten thirsty all the time, so it definitely needs a repot. So we're going to be doing that, and I want to possibly repot my really big, sad, basically dead Majesty Palm. I don't know if today is going to be the day that I might get rid of it. 2 out of 3 of the plants that are in the pot are totally dead, and I don't know if I want to repot it and remove those, or if I want to just see what's going on in there and maybe get rid of the whole thing. So we're going to take a look at that. And I have some plants that I want to update you guys on, my giganteum and triangularis. And then I also want to show you my Sansevieria erythraeae, Dracaena erythraeae. It's my really tall snake plant, my snake plant that's like all the way to the ceiling, and it flowers. It's been on this whole flowering journey for the past month, basically. Now the flower has finally finished flowering and there's a big bare inflorescence on there, so I want to cut that off and do a little bit of maintenance on that snake plant and show you some of the really amazing footage of the flowering process. So let's just get into it. So we're over here by my snake plant. Oh, here's the pitcher plant. It's doing well. I'm keeping the soil moist and not letting it dry all the way anymore. So hopefully some pitchers might form. Okay, and then here is my snake plant. So this is all of the spent flowers. They're all over the floor, and I need to clean this up today. But I also want to show you some of the footage of this amazing plant. So first, I just want to show you what the flower looks like right now. So it got just about my height. I am about 5 feet tall. You can see these little like dewdrops on it, and it's actually a little bit of like a kind of sweet nectar to attract pollinators. So those little dewdrops have been forming all over this inflorescence the entire time. So the entire cycle of this plant's flowering process took about 6 weeks. I noticed towards the end of January that the flower spike was beginning to form at the base of the plant, and then it continued to grow and grow and grow for about a month, and then the plant developed the flower buds, and then it went through a process of nightly blooming for about 2 weeks, and it was a completely amazing thing that happened in here. I actually can't believe that I was lucky enough to experience this flower. Let's talk about floral anatomy for a second. So snake plants grow floral structure called an inflorescence, and the difference between an inflorescence and a flower is that an inflorescence is actually a whole group of flowers arranged along a central or main axis. So inflorescences a lot of times are colloquially just referred to as flowers, because a lot of times it'll be a grouping of a whole bunch of smaller flowers that form a structure that looks like one big flower, and people know what you're talking about when you call an inflorescence a flower. But to be technically correct, snake plants grow in inflorescence. I think most of the houseplants that we're familiar with, a lot of those tropical aroids, they all grow inflorescences. Snake plants grow a type of inflorescence that is indeterminate, and it's called a raceme. So inflorescences can be either determinate or indeterminate, and this has to do with whether or not there is a predetermined size and set floral shape. So with the determinate inflorescence, the growth of the inflorescence stops once it's grown into a predetermined structure. But an indeterminate inflorescence doesn't have a predetermined number of flowers and can theoretically grow indefinitely large, kind of like what happened on my snake plant. But in practice, also like on my snake plant, at some point the inflorescence kind of just stops growing and it just sort of peters out. A raceme, which is the particular type of indeterminate inflorescence that a snake plant grows, has a particular growth pattern where the flowers at the base of the inflorescence develop first, and it blooms progressively moving up the floral structure. And on top of that, the raceme does grow from the plant's apical meristem, which is a highly important bundle of cells that are responsible for a plant's new growth. And it's sort of like the growing point, the tip of a plant. And so once the raceme finishes growing, the plant that it came from also stops growing because it terminates that apical meristem, that growth point. So on a snake plant, once it flowers, the plant that flowered actually does stop growing. But unlike on like an agave plant or a bromeliad, it doesn't mean that the plant is going to die. It just doesn't grow any more new leaves. And then the snake plant will continue to grow new pups and will spread underground by rhizome the way that it usually does. So I took a bunch of time lapses while this plant was flowering to try to show you what was happening. So I realized pretty early on, the first night that it bloomed, that it blooms at night. So the only time that you could see the actual display of the flowers all looking beautiful and open was at nighttime. And the way that this flower bloomed was that each little flower on the inflorescence would bloom for a single night only, and then in the morning would close up and shrivel up and fall off. There were enough buds on here for pretty much the whole thing to be in flower for about 2 weeks, and it was really, really a spectacular show. And the smell is actually what made me realize on the first night that the flower was flowering. It completely filled my apartment with this crazy perfume smell. So I used to collect perfumes, fancy perfumes. I go through a lot of phases where I obsess over different things, and I used to be obsessed with perfume. And when this flower opened up on the first night, the place that my mind instantly went was Dior Poison, which is like a really iconic classic perfume. This flower smelled like Dior Poison to me, plus a little bit of, or a lot of some kind of musk that I was describing as kind of like a barf smell. So on the one hand, there was a very nice floral smell, and then on the other hand, there's a side to the smell that I personally found very unappealing. And what's interesting is that gross smell was only there the first couple of nights of flowering. And to be honest, I'm not completely sure if it's that I got used to the smell and started to like it, or if the smell changed, but I'm pretty sure the smell started to change over time. And by the end of the flowering, it was very, very sweet. The smell was very sugary. But for the first week or so, the smell was very musky. So I think the smell did actually change over time, which I think is so fascinating. So what I'm showing you now is some of the footage of all of the time lapses that I took. The flowers would start to open up as soon as the sun would start to set, and they would be fully open around midnight. And then when the sun started to rise the next morning, the flowers would just close up and shrivel up and fall off eventually. So now I want to just cut off this inflorescence. Snake plants, unlike some other plants like hoyas, they will never flower from the same inflorescence twice. So this stalk that's on here now needs to just get cut off because it's never going to do anything again other than potentially take some energy from the plant. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. And then I want to finally add a bamboo pole in for the one long leaf that I have in the closet. This plant has just been living in the closet partially for a really long time because it can't stand on its own anymore. And I've been resisting putting a bamboo pole in because I think it's ugly, but honestly, it's uglier that it's in the closet. So I'm gonna, duh, right? So I'm gonna try to jam a pole in there or try to see what I can do because I don't want to damage the plant, but I kind of want to get it out of the closet now. So yeah, so then I just wanted to show you all of the footage from this time lapse because I think that this is one of the coolest things that has ever happened in my collection. So this plant, as I've been saying, flowers at nighttime, and that's because snake plants, like a lot of succulents and cacti, they engage in something called cam photosynthesis, which means that basically they are active at night. So you might have heard people say that snake plants are a good plant to put in your bedroom because they filter the air at night. I don't know if this is something that you guys have heard because I think that this is more of like a pop science kind of fact about plants, and it's something that, like, when I work in the plant shop, customers always come in and say they want a snake plant because it filters the air at night and it's good for them to sleep next to a snake plant. Okay, I'm gonna just myth bust this really quickly. While it might be factually true that snake plants filter the air at night, all plants filter the air. It is a byproduct of what they do to grow and live. You might be already familiar with the mechanism of photosynthesis, but just a really, really quick description. Plants take CO2, carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere, and they take H2O, water, and they do a chemical reaction inside the plant to create sugars, which is their energy, and the byproduct, which they don't need, is oxygen, and they spit that back out. And so it's kind of like their poop. Plants poop oxygen, okay? So all plants technically filter the air, but certain plants, like snake plants and some desert plants and plants that are adapted to very hot environments, engage in a type of photosynthesis that's called cam photosynthesis. And what that means is basically just that they do their photosynthesis at night rather than during the daytime. And the reason for that is because part of the process of photosynthesis involves the plant needing to uptake CO2 and release oxygen, and that involves the plant needing to open and close little pores on the leaf, their stomata. And every time these pores open and close, it's also an opportunity for the plant to transpire, as in lose a little bit of water. So transpiration is something that plants always are doing. They're always like losing some water through their leaves, as well as using it for their photosynthetic process. This is why in the summertime, when it's hotter, transpiration rates are higher. This is something that is said about plants, and it refers to basically how much the plants sweat, or not sweat, but how much water evaporates out of the plant's leaves. And every time plants open and close their pores, their stomata, there's a potential for transpiration to happen. So for plants that grow in very hot climates, like snake plants, which are native to like Africa, during the daytime, the sun is hot and harsh, and if they were to open and close their stomata all the time, they would really be transpiring a lot of water. And the way that they have adapted to survive and to not transpire all the time is to keep their pores closed during the day, and then to open up for transpiration and oxygen and CO2 exchange only at night when the temperatures are cooler and the plant is a little bit more protected from shriveling up and drying out during the hot temperatures of the day. Along those same lines, this snake plant, it flowers at night, and those flowers are even more delicate than the leaves, and so it preserves itself and its flowering mechanism by only opening up those flowers at nighttime. This is all part of this snake plant's sort of nocturnal thing, where it's always in this protective self-defense state where it's trying to protect itself from the sun. And then on top of it, plants that are night bloomers usually have white flowers because that's the easiest color to see in the dark, and they tend to be very, very fragrant because they need to attract those pollinators at night, especially when they only open up for a short period of time. They need to kind of like flash their lights and put out all of their signage to pollinators that, hey, we're open for a limited time only, come pollinate us. So that's what this plant was doing. I don't think that it's a complete myth that snake plants filter the air at night. It is technically true, but I think that you would need to sleep in a bed of snake plants for you to actually benefit from the amount of oxygen that they produce. Like realistically, I think unless you have so many plants, it probably does more for your air to just open the window than it does to have a lot of plants in your space. Like even for my apartment, I don't really think of myself as having better air quality than anyone else, because I still don't think that it's enough plants to really make a difference. It needs to be that like every surface is covered in leaves for the oxygen levels to actually be significantly different. But yeah, anyway, so now what I want to do is I want to go cut off the flower. So it's gonna be sad, but we're gonna just do it. Ugh. It's super sticky. It's covered in this nectar. I think it's sweet. Don't taste random plants, but I just wanted to taste it. It's sweet. Can't find my pruning shears anywhere, so we're using scissors. I'd recommend pruning shears for cutting something this big, but I just can't find them right now, so I'm gonna hack at it with these. Thank you, flower, for being beautiful for like a month. You were wonderful. Normally, I would recommend cutting it a little bit lower down, but I just couldn't reach with my scissors. I've got a really tall bamboo pole here. It's like almost as tall as the snake plant. So I think I'm gonna just try to shove this in here. It's not stable enough, not in the soil. So I really didn't want to do this, but I'm putting this in the soil because I want to get this plant out of the closet, so I need to give it a support. Whoa, this plant has never come away from the wall before. Since I put it there and it got so tall. So I feel good about this now. This just reminded me, I wanted to show you too, real quick, my Hoya retusa is flowering all over the place. I'm so excited to have just taken care of that snake plant. Like, hooray, I can put it somewhere else now and admire it without it being in the closet. And I also want to do this palm tree, repot it, get it out of there, maybe get rid of it. But I did also say that I wanted to do my Monstera Aurea repotting, and I want to just do that one first because I like to repot in order of like most precious to least precious plant, just in case. This is like a little bit of paranoia coming into play here, but disease between plants tends to be spread by soil. And so if I have multiple plants that I want to repot, I like to start with the most precious one so that I know that it's not getting contaminated. Even though I don't believe that anything has a contaminant, it's just one of those ways that I like to be extra safe. So we're gonna go do this plant real quick and then get back to the palm tree. Okay, so got my Aurea here, and then I forgot I put this on the table too because I just want to cut off this thing and show you how I prune it. So this is a Stephania erecta, a crabe, a caudex plant, and it's not supposed to look like this, but it's also possible for this to have much more compact growth. So this got really stretched out. I mentioned this when I was redoing my shelf area next to the couch. I pulled it out because it had been sitting in a place where I don't access it very well, and it has just been growing all over the place and stretching towards the light. And if I prune this back, I know that I can put it in a brighter location and it will grow more compact next time. So this plant is meant to grow these little cute round leaves. Right now I don't really have any leaves on here because this thing just keeps stretching and stretching, looking for a light, which is why I want to cut this off. But this plant is honestly like it's like an ideal plant for an underwaterer like me, or somebody who has lots of different interests, and I go through periods of being obsessed and then periods of not caring at all about certain plants. Honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that that's just, I know that that's how I am, and I make it work for me. And this is one of those plants that is very forgiving and actually works really well for that, because you can kind of ignore it and let it be dormant for as long as you want. And then as soon as you start paying more attention to it and watering it more and giving it brighter light, it starts to grow. And then when you stop caring about it, it can just kind of fall back into dormancy and it'll wait for you. So I really appreciate that about this plant. So the way this plant grows is that it starts off by putting out like a green stalk, and then at any point along that stalk, it can grow more branches, and then those little stalks form these round leaves at the end. And like I was just saying, I don't really have any round leaves on here right now because it's still just stretching for light. Some people do use like a cute little round trellis or something like that to maintain this growth, but for me, I've sprouted and resprouted this plant so many times now, I've lost count. I've had this for many years, and it's in just like a tiny layer of moss. It's basically bare root in here. It's stuck in the pot, but there's almost no substrate. I have a little layer of sphagnum moss in the bottom, and I only water this like when I remember. Sometimes it goes 2 months without water. Sometimes I water it like once a week, and then when I start doing that, it grows. So yeah, I'm gonna just cut this back, and I might start watering it again, I might not, but it will definitely sprout again. So yeah, I'm gonna just cut this. no regrets. Excuse me, let me back up. If you've never seen this before, this plant is really funny. It's like a potato. I know it looks like a potato and it just grows this single little sprout. Yeah, I just cut that back. Absolutely no remorse because I know that this is going to sprout again and it will be more attractive and less stretched out next time. So this Monstera Aurea is one of my original rare plants. I kind of like went crazy and bought this, I don't know, a few years ago, and it was very expensive. I paid several $100s for a very small plant from somebody on Etsy and began to grow it out and started growing it out and started propagating it. So all of the other Aureas that you might have seen on my channel, they are all propagated from this plant originally. So I've cut it back a couple of times, and I originally was propagating it for sale, but then I grew very attached to all of my propagations, and I'm not sure if I can part with any of them. But yeah, this plant has kind of slowed down its growth, and I unfortunately the other day fried up one of the leaves and it did get a little bit of burn on it. This plant has been getting thirstier and thirstier, and as the weather has been changing and it's been getting warmer and the days are getting longer, I let this plant go a little bit too long without water, and unfortunately I'm having some crispiness, and I had, I think, a little bit of sunburn one day. So I can show you my sad sunburnt leaf. So anyway, it's time to repot this into a bigger pot because I don't want to see any more of that burn on here. This yellow variegated Monstera is a rare type of Monstera commercially. I think a little bit rarer than the white variegated one, the Albo, just because there are more of those around, and those kind of like got hype first, and now I think people are maybe trying to collect the Aureas. Aurea Monstera, by the way, the word Aurea is usually used for yellow variegation, and that's because that etymological root for that is gold. The chemical symbol for gold is Au, and that's because Au means gold. So Aurea will be like the cultivar name or the variety name that gets applied to species that have yellow variegation a lot of the times, just because Au is a root that means golden. Okay, so we're gonna do this Aurea now. This Aurea Monstera is actually growing a new leaf. I don't know if it's variegated. Should I open it up? Don't do this at home. But I really want to see if it's gonna have variegation. Kind of looks like this one's gonna be an all green leaf, but that's okay. It's funny because I've got this stake in here from when the plant used to grow a different way. Like, I cut it back before and it used to grow up this stake, and I cut it and now it's growing over there, and the stake serves absolutely no purpose. So it's time for repotting. I like to use paint spreaders just because I have a lot of art supplies to separate the roots from the sides of terracotta pots, because it can be really hard to get plants out of terracotta. Actually, this pot isn't terracotta, it's basalt, but it's very porous and it's very similar to terracotta. So I want to show you something with this plant. 0% of the stem is in the ground. It's just the roots. You see how I can stick my finger under there? It's because this stem is actually just a little nub, and the roots are what's in the soil. So I have to try to be careful here because it's just holding itself up with roots alone. All right, that's a root-bound plant. This will be really glad to be in a new pot. So I ordered some moss poles on Amazon. I didn't spend too long looking for these. They're just like cocoa core wrapped around a pole. The only thing that I did try to select for was I picked poles that has a plastic pole rather than a wood one on the inside, because I do think that that will help prevent it from being moldy ultimately. And this set came with like 6 poles in the box. Some of them are really short, but they're all stackable, and it was like $25 or something like that. But I didn't feel like getting all the supplies to make these myself, just wanted to order some, so I've got them now. And yeah, I'm gonna repot this Monstera onto one of these coco coir poles. I know I've talked a lot about how much I don't believe in these, and my mind is starting to change after I've been using wood stakes that are like unfinished and very rough and allow the roots to grip a little bit better than on the bamboo poles I normally advocate for. And the plants that I've switched onto the wood stakes really tend to do a lot better. So I'm kind of coming around to the moss pole thing. I was really very resistant to the moss poles for a while because I kind of don't think that they look super attractive, but I think the plant growth is so much better with a moss pole that actually it's probably worth it. So I need to make some moss poles. So this makes me nervous to hold because it's just attached by the little roots. I mean, I guess they're thick aerial roots that become soil roots. So this plant is probably going to need to be repotted again soon because these poles are all like too short, but I wanted to just use them and resituate this plant for now anyway, before I make some larger moss poles. So I like these poles because they're stackable. They're not like the sturdiest thing ever, but I like that you can extend it a little bit. So the first pole I put on I don't think is really quite tall enough for this plant, but with two poles on here, it's gonna be good, I think. Okay, I feel great about that, and this root is too long, so I'm gonna just, no regrets, cut it off and stick it in the pot. All right. This is like my most prized plant, by the way. I'm in love with this Aurea Monstera, so I feel like Gollum when I look at it. I'm like, my precious. So anyway, I'm gonna go put this back. Come over here so you can admire it a little bit. Look at that leaf and the new leaf. And a little burnt spot. Okay. Let's get this Majesty Palm out of here and see what's going on with this. Oh gosh, these are totally dead. Wow, have you ever seen that? I've never seen a palm tree just completely pull apart before. This is completely my fault that this plant is this dry. The day I bought it, I knew that it was in too small of a pot, and I never repotted it because I was like, whatever, I'm gonna just deal with it. And then after I missed a couple of waterings, or several waterings over the course of like 2 years that I've had this plant, it's just never been able to quite pop back, and some of the plants in here have died off. frond is all the way out here. This frond looks terrible, to be honest. But if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I have a really hard time throwing out plants that have even a little bit of life in them. So I don't know if we're gonna get rid of this or what, but let's just get into this root area and see what's going on in here. Root bound. Look at that. You can't even see any soil because it's so root bound. Okay, so a lot of these roots are already dead. This all makes sense to me. I'm just gonna rip this apart. Oh gosh, that didn't work either. I'm left with this core. Look at this. There for a second to hold this plant up because it's wanting to lean this way. So I need to get some more soil, and I think I'm just gonna repot it into this exact same pot because now that I took out the two dead plants, there's actually a lot more room for the roots to expand in there, and I think that this plant will be able to hold a lot more moisture, and hopefully maybe we can get some new growth. I don't really have any super attachment to this plant. I like it, but I also knew at the time of buying it that it was probably going to be problematic, and I've never been super attached to it. So this is kind of like my last ditch effort. We're going to see if any of these fronds that have just been so dry forever will be able to open up and maybe see if we can get any new growth on this plant. So yeah, let me go get some more soil. So yeah, this stuff I use, I always call it soil, but it's actually a soilless potting mix because it doesn't have any compost, no worm castings, no added nutrients. It's mostly peat moss and some bark and lava rocks and perlite. Smelling the soil. Whenever I open a new bag of soil, I just like to smell it because sometimes I have bought soil that smells really weird, like very stinky, like something's rotting. And if you ever smell that and it's supposed to not have any compost or anything in it, it means that there's something funky growing in your soil, and I just wouldn't recommend using it. This soil smells fine. know that this pot is still a little bit too small, but that's okay. Okay, hooray. So this plant is now repotted. Not sure if it's gonna make that much of a difference, but I feel good that I took care of that. So yeah. Definitely doesn't look good, but it doesn't look quite as bad as it did before, I think. It's okay. I think it looks better. Okay, I have to show you my ficus triangularis variegata from my Plantarina unboxing. It's growing tons of leaves. It basically only took a week for this thing to start erupting with tons of new growth. It's been only like 2 weeks or so, maybe a little over 2 weeks, and this thing has grown so much new growth. So all the leaves that aren't like the giant ones are all new. So even like this is a new leaf down here. Look at how big it is already. So some of the original leaves on there, you might notice, have some brown edges, and I'm pretty sure that's burn. And that's because I've been setting this plant right over in my floor area over there where it does get some direct afternoon sun, some pretty hot sun actually, and it did kind of fry up some of the older leaves, but the new growth that's coming in is already acclimated to the sun because it's growing in those conditions and it's loving it, and I think it's just doing really well. I've been letting it dry almost completely between waterings. I wait till I feel like it feels like a tiny bit damp down in the bottom of the soil, which means that it's probably ready for another watering, maybe tomorrow. I also like to use the weight as a measure of how dry it is, and I can just tell when I pick it up now that there's got to be moist soil down here because it's a little bit heavy. So I wait till it feels a little bit lighter, and then I give it a thorough soak and I put it back in its direct sunspot. So this is doing so well, and you know, a lot of people said that I should ask for a refund on this plant, and I'm sure that I could have, and I'm sure that Plantarina would have issued one. Well, I guess I'm not sure, but I should have mentioned in the video that I knew that this plant was going to arrive in kind of bad shape. Ficus triangularis are really, really finicky, and the reason why I thought it would be a fun unboxing to do in the Plantarina video was I really thought that if there was anybody who could send a Ficus triangularis and have it arrive and not be completely dead, it would be Plantarina, and that would be a miraculous feat. And I actually think that this is a testament to how healthy Plantarina's stocks of this plant were to begin with, the fact that it's growing this fast. This could not have happened if it hadn't been a very healthy plant to begin with. So yeah, it's got lots of new growth on there. I'm so excited about it. Just know that if you're planning on ordering a Ficus triangularis or a variegated Ficus triangularis, for it to arrive with all of the leaves completely fallen off, that's probably normal. These things really, really don't like getting shipped. They don't like missing out on even a single day of their normal light. So being in a box for a couple of days is totally going to destroy a plant like this and make it lose all of its leaves. But hopefully they should grow back, and it's kind of a ficus thing. So yeah, there's that. And then let's go take a look at my philodendron giganteum. Here's my philodendron giganteum. I propagated it recently. I cut it back and it sprouted new leaf spikes like pretty much right away. Look at the new growth on here. Let me show you. Okay, so the philodendron giganteum over here has already grown so much. So let's see if I can show you what's going on. So this stem there and this stem there are both new growth, and right there is where I originally cut it. So you can kind of see that both stalks already have 2 whole leaves on them, and they're already almost as big as the other leaves on the plant. don't know if you can see how big this is with my hand for scale. I can barely reach it, but yeah, the first leaves that came out were kind of funny and round. And then the next leaves that they're making look totally like normal giganteum leaves. It's pretty amazing. All right, you guys, this is a really fun video for me. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. I feel really good about repotting the palm tree, situating my snake plant. I'm really excited that I got to show you those flowers. I would love to hear from you on if you've ever had a snake plant flower or what's flowering in your collection these days. So yeah, I'm really glad to have got that situated. I'm trying to figure out now where I want to put this because my original plan was to put it where the palm tree was because I wanted to throw this out, but I didn't. So I don't know if I'm gonna move the snake plant somewhere else or if I'll just kind of leave it where it is. One thing I do know is that I'm definitely going to be moving more of my snake plants into brighter light locations because the flowering was really exciting and I want more of my snake plants to do that. The flower, that was honestly one of the most exciting things that I think has ever happened in my collection. So I'm really glad that I've got this place where I can share that with you guys because this is just so exciting for me. I was like freaking out for 2 weeks about it, just not able to believe that I have such a big flower in my apartment. So I'm really hoping that I can get more snake plants to flower, and I've just been enjoying flowers so much these days. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you are all having a super fantastic week, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.